Well, hello everyone. In this episode, my family and I spent the summer in Italy, visiting the ancient city of Rome, swimming at Capri, eating a shit ton of pizza, and wandering the busy streets of Napoli.
If I could tell you, I don't think you'd believe.
We first drove to Düsseldorf Airport, where we took the plane to Rome, away from the cold, rainy weather, welcoming us to the warm Italian atmosphere.
Could show you, I'd hope that you could see.
When we got there, it was already later in the evening, and so we decided to stay at the camping for the upcoming day to calm down a bit and to take in the summer sun. On our second day, we headed to Vatican City, where we had a look at the St. Peter's Chapel and spent some time taking in the ancient beauty of Rome. Afterwards, we made the mutual decision to get our first Italian ice cream of our stay, which was such a delight.
If I could tell you, I don't think you'd believe.
For the next day, we planned to visit the Colosseum, which we stood in line for about 2 hours, although the time flew by and it was definitely worth it. Afterwards, we got lunch literally across the street, and then immediately after we headed back towards the Colosseum, except this time we went inside the Roman Forum, one of the most powerful empires of history. It was absolutely breathtaking and almost magical to imagine what it must have looked like at the time. And just like every other day, by afternoon we headed back to our camping to cool down in the pool. We started our day at the Trevi Fountain, which was almost heavenly and felt so unreal to see in real life. I had never expected the Trevi Fountain to be so hidden, and I'd always imagined it laying at the end of a big square, which was obviously not the case. We then headed to the Spanish Steps, which I thought were a bit overrated in a way. My apologies. And we then did some shopping and grabbed some lunch in one of the many cafes and restaurants of the city. Today we didn't really go to Rome until later in the afternoon, when it had cooled down a little bit. We visited various Roman tourist attractions and enjoyed our views with some drinks in hand. The Roman style and arts often remind me of how my dad once told me that I have an angelic face, and I never really understood what it meant until looking at the statues and paintings, and I like to think that in a previous life I must have lived in a time like this. After a couple days in Rome, we packed our stuff and headed to Pompeii, the volcanic city. On the first day, we chilled by the pool and my brother and I made pasta that evening. However, the next day we took a bus tour through Napoli, seeing all the highlights the city has to offer.
You're so wonderful. A star could never shine as bright as you.
After doing some more impressions on foot, we then strolled to the attractions that took our interest the most. And I must admit that, just like Rome, the city did have a lot of garbage and seemed very neglected for such a famous city.
So lucky I met you and I still can't believe that I get to see those.
Now it was finally time to visit the actual ancient city of Pompeii with breathtaking views, beautiful statues and ancient pedestrian crossings. We strolled through the remnants of this beautiful city.
It's not optional. How gravity just pulls me right to you. To you. Even the dark days still see light. Even the birds still sing at night. Every word just comes out right when I'm with you.
On our last day in Pompeii, we headed to the beach covered in black sand caused by the volcanic eruption.
Can't believe that I get to see those eyes for more than
It was wonderful to see, and the water felt so nice and clear.
so lucky I met you.
We finally headed to the place that especially my brother and I were most excited for, the Amalfi Coast. We stayed in the Lemon Hills, which we soon found was barely doable by car, as you can see here. We had to transfer to an extra small car with a special driver to bring us back and forth to our Airbnb and back to the center of the city. It was the most dreamiest place I've ever been, and it had incredible views.
Can't believe that I get to see those eyes for more than tonight. Swear you must have fell from the sky. I feel so lucky I met you.
Walking down these ancient and small streets was one of my favorite things about the trip, followed by the amazing island of Capri. It felt like almost the entire island existed out of cliffs, plants, yachts, and restaurants. A real dream come true.
Being too dramatic, overthinking, getting myself worked up over nothing. But baby, you said it's over, but cry on my shoulder. And we matter, but I'm still thinking of you. On the car ride home, staring at my phone, still invested, but I know you said we.
Our last day at the Amalfi Coast we filled with lots of swimming, trying to stay alive in the unbearable summer heat, while also trying to tan as much as possible. However, in the evening it cooled down a bit, and so we headed out for dinner at the cutest restaurant ever, and of course enjoyed one of our last drives in the tiny van through the tiny old streets of Sorrento's Lemon Hills. After about 1.5 weeks of being very busy at vacationing, we moved to Monte Redondo, a province in Rome where we basically just stayed at the apartment for the last couple of days. However, we did go swimming in a volcanic lake with black sand and no other tourists except us. Here I managed to let the dog get over his fear of water by continuously throwing him a ball, which followed by a very happy Italian woman who then proceeded to apparently tell her entire family about my heroic action. It was very wholesome, I must admit. Now that was all of my trip to Italy. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to subscribe, give a thumbs up, and definitely check out all of my other travel diaries.